But this was one of those moments when the whole country was watching, and indeed probably a good part of the world was watching, the announcement of this. And he looked extremely weak. He was playing into what should have been his strength. And his claim was he can sell us to the world as the former president couldn't. And to be dismissed in the first cut, not even made the semifinals after the personal commitment, may have lasting damage of the people's confidence that he is quite as able a person as he's presented himself. And I know the governor knows this, and anyone else who's certainly worked for a president, but any politician to some extent, you don't notice the damages, what's permanent damage, bit by bit. It's sort of like, I don't want to be in bad taste, I'm going to be, but it's a little bit like traumatic brain injury, which we're learning about, or like a concussion, that each event, you don't notice it, you don't feel any different. A boxer feels great for 10 years. Slowly, he notices that he's losing capacity. And the damage accumulates even though you don't notice each trauma. And that happens to a president. You know, any given day, oh, it's just a bad day. You know, tomorrow's another day, but it all takes its toll in the minds of the public. And it adds up, and then suddenly you find yourself a 38% job approval. And you can't, and Washington isn't afraid of you anymore. And you can't get anything done. And it's all the accumulated mistakes you've made, or the unfair shots, the outrageous slings and arrows that hit a president. I think this was one of those events that is going to have a continuing effect. And probably one of the most important things that's going to affect our future is how successful the president is in Washington. And he has not yet convinced his fellow Democrats that he can't be rolled. Well, let me rephrase that. I think people are beginning to think he can be rolled. And there's nothing more dangerous for a president than for his own allies. Forget the opposition. You can deal with an opposition. It's when your allies won't go along and keep shoving you and nudging, pushing you because you haven't stood up. Presidents usually have a time when, Reagan had his air traffic control law when he showed his toughness. Jack Kennedy had the Cuban Missile Crisis. Regretfully, he didn't live long enough to take advantage of having shown his toughness. But if he had, that was his moment. Different presidents have it. Some never had it. Jimmy Carter had an encounter with a rabbit. And for those who remember, alleged rabbit that attacked him. And he stood up to it, apparently. Although he did not bring the skin back, so we don't know for sure. Obama so far is looking like the person who the Democrats are perfectly happy to see if they can't keep pushing for. And he's going to have to prove himself pretty soon, because we're going to know a lot more about this presidency by Christmas time. If he has not accomplished substantially more than he has now, we could be looking at a substantially failed, or on the brink of failing presidency. You see a president in the mid-40s who didn't accomplish anything substantial, not counting foreign policy. I mean, foreign policy, you don't know when those chickens are going to come home to roost. I mean, you can be doing a bad job and it can take years before you find out. In other words, with Iran and nuclear, we could be in the same situation now that we were with North Korea, where they kind of play us along for months or years, and there's no evidence of the crisis. The crisis hits at some point, but maybe not in a relevant time period. So you never know how foreign events are going to play out. But certainly domestically, there's a lot of disenchantment amongst Democrats in Washington that they don't have a leader that they feel confident about. And I think that's a message of weakness. And when I talk on TV, I'm not rude about the president. And it's, by the way, a lesson I learned in the 90s when we were fighting President Clinton. We were very aggressive rhetorically against him, and we were rude at times. And I don't think it was useful. I'm glad to have a lot of our people who aren't running for election, who don't have R's technically after their name, some of our talk show hosts, be as tough as they want to be. But I think for Republicans, candidates, people affiliated with the party, that we've got to be very careful, because even if the public doesn't like the president, they respect the office and they don't like to see the other party saying rude things about the person who occupies that office. I think we went a little bit further than we should have in '94, and I think we paid a certain price for that. And I think with President Obama, we don't have to go further. I think the programs are so destructive of the fundamental values of this country and the capacity for us to be prosperous and free, that we can focus very toughly on the policies but be respectful of the man. That's what I actually changed my course. I'd written a column in early January where I got my blood up a little bit, and I borrowed a phrase which I always hated that they use against President Bush. I said the president lied, the economy died. It was a takeoff, obviously, on what they had said about President Bush, that he'd lied and troops had died. And I'd done it it was basically my column on the budget, which is not a sexy topic. But I wanted to give it a kind of a sexy opening, so I started with that. Got tremendous reaction. This is the reason why one tends to do that. Wolf Blitz and people called up and said, "You come on," and I do the show regularly, "Come on and talk about your column." Sean Handy had me on his radio show and his TV show. Several of the networks called me up to talk about it. The column did remarkably well, a tremendous number of emails. Rush read bits of it on the air, and that's the appeal. But on the end, I stopped after that, and I thought, I'm going down that path again. I'm not going to do it. So I did a column saying I said, we're getting too ugly too fast. I'm going to be respectful of the man, but very tough on the policy. I think the Republicans be very tough on the policy because the policies are very bad. And at least for me, my guidance is be respectful of the man. Now, let me say something else, because I was on TV last night being asked whether I agreed with Senator Lindsey Graham, who said that Glenn Beck is cynical and Rush was in it for money, and various harsh statements about people who are talking to scores of millions of our voters. And I defended Glenn Beck against the charge of cynicism. I didn't agree with everything he said, but I said no reason to think that he's not sincere in his views. And then Suzanne Malveaux was also on the panel, and she said, "Well, do you agree that with Glenn Beck that the president's a racist?" I said, "No, I assume that Glenn was sincere. Not that he was right, but he was sincere in this. I was being careful to not agree with something I didn't want to agree to. And if you're in the game, you want to be careful not to agree to something that can be damaging to you. On the other hand, I wasn't going to give up an ally on our side because we need him. And this is a good time to talk briefly about how we function as a party. I do not believe in excluding people from our party. I mean, obviously in the Northeast, you understand the price that you've paid because some of our people do want to exclude. I understand there's no way that Tom DeLay could win an election in the Northeast. That his set of issues would not play. And I understand the tremendous value at a technical level of having moderate Republicans in our party with all those, and that we still share a deep, fundamental set of principled views about government and values. But that even when a moderate can't be with us on a vote, they can help. I'll tell you one story about Nancy Johnson, and it was on the labor HHS appropriation in '95. It was the last vote we had before the August break, and it was a tough vote because it had all the social issues were in there. And we had a tremendous spring. We passed all the contract items. We had a high note. We got Newton given an alternative Oval Office address. We had CBS giving him. I asked Mike Deaver very generously, came in and decided to set for us. And we had a tremendous springtime. This was Newton's first spring as speaker. And then we didn't want to go home losing the vital labor HHS appropriation vote. And we were struggling. We couldn't get to the vote. Nancy couldn't vote for that because it wasn't consistent with her values and her district's values. But she was working the floor, trying to find fellow members who had some trouble with it, but not as much trouble as she did, and helping them find their way to vote for it. So that she was a full part of the team, even though in that particular instance she couldn't make the actual vote. The value of having a broad team that can represent a country, not just a section, is central to being a governing party. And it works both ways. I know